So we're back. It's been a month since we've released an episode. It's been a really busy month, as usual. I know I come in with my excuses every time, but it really has been quite a busy month. It's I've had kind of a reunion getaway with a couple of friends that lasted a few days. Oh, it was absolutely lovely. We went so on the border between England and Scotland. There's a little place called the Lake District, and we went over for a little cabin, and I highly recommend this place. It's called the Hidden River Cabins. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but no, it's an absolutely stunning place. It's kind of go away, and it's this beautiful cabin, and it has these hot tubs outside of it, and you don't get much reception and Wi-Fi, which means that people were really kind of, we were in touch with our human selves, and we were chatting, we were catching up, and it was brilliant to catch up with people that some of them I hadn't seen for 4 years since I've graduated. So it was absolutely lovely to do that. I do apologise if you guys are hearing this really loud background noise around me, but it is raining so badly today. We kind of have a thunderstorm, so you'll be hearing the dotting, and then every now and again you probably might get a little bit of a thunderstorm, so I do apologise if that's in your ear. But yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with today. But yeah, today I don't have a reading, so I do apologise about that. Don't have a reading, but I have a really, really cool topic that I would love to talk to you guys about today. Before we go into that, I want to do the usual spiel of just telling you guys, love your feedback after every episode. Please keep them coming. Get your feedback sent to mindselfindulgence at gmail. Today's going to be a struggle if this is the start of the episode. Get your feedback to mindselfindulgence at gmail.com. Please, you can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Acast, and on SoundCloud. You also find us on Castbox. All of these, all you have to do is just search for Mindful Self-Indulgence Podcast. You'll also find us on Patreon. If you do like this show and you would like it to be on a more sort of consistent basis, the fact that I can give a bit more time to it, the fact that I can put a bit more equipment in it, go on our Patreon site. The podcast is always going to stay free. If you want to listen to it for free, that's absolutely no problem. But if you want to support the content and want to support the podcast, go on www.patreon.com// Mindful Self-Indulgence Podcast. And you can link with us, you can donate, and once you've donated, you get a couple of cool things. Nothing major right now, but the things that you get when you become a Patreon will grow, but mainly right now you get access to the episodes a bit earlier than usual, which is cool. If you actually enjoy it. If not, like I say, please continue to listen to the podcast for free. It's always going to stay as free content, but it is supported by you guys. We don't have any sponsors. I'm not actively looking for sponsors or advertisers. I don't think that I'm at that stage yet. I don't really want to become that stage. I don't want sponsors and sort of advertisers coming and telling me where to go and what to talk about and stuff like that. So I'd like to keep it as sort of us involved as possible. So yeah, that's the spiel done. So welcome to episode 8 of Mindful Self-Indulgence. So today's topic that we're going to talk about is something that I had to kind of learn about over the last couple of years of my work. Last year and the year before that, I was very much in the sort of, I'm not a graphic designer, I'm not a developer in any way, shape or form, but I was in that sort of industry, and I was working with a lot of designers and developers, and it's quite interesting looking at the way that they view things. Because when we see branding, when we see logo, it's something that when we see it in businesses and stuff like that, you see it, it goes, it doesn't have that thought process of how did I reach what I think about this, whether I like it, whether I don't, do the colours strike out. It just happens and it's very quick in your head, and that's the end of that. So to see how these processes are actually created, and to see how a logo, a colour, all that kind of stuff can be kind of formed and merged with each other in a perfect sort of geometrical way, was absolutely stunning and fascinating to me. But one of the main things that really stuck out with me was colours and the psychology of colours. So when we were working in it, we had to kind of think of, right, okay, so what's your colour palette and what colour do you want to kind of put forward? Because a lot of people go for ones that they personally like, but is that what you want people to kind of know about you, or is that what you want your business to know about you? And why is it that you like the colour that you like, but maybe it's not good for the business that you're going for? There was just so many questions to do with colours, and I was like, I mean, obviously you understand that colours has an effect on you, but the fact that the psychology goes so deep that when you're creating something to send the right message, to portray the right message, and to kind of get the right listeners and get the right sort of expectations about you, you would focus on what colour it is that you're putting forward. So that for me was really, really interesting. So let's look at some colours and what it is that they sort of convey to us. So for instance, like, let's think of the colour red, right? And when you think of the colour red, you usually get exciting, bold, sort of youthful, fiery, hunger. And that's why if you think of like a lot of the food sort of places, they'll have a bit of red in them. You get that in sort of yellowish as well. Because in yellow you get sort of warmth and optimism and clarity. So if you think of like McDonald's, Burger King, Coca-Cola, sort of Lay's, all these sort of really, Kellogg's, all these really big sort of food places, you would find the colour red in their logo. Obviously, it's not a set rule. It does change from sort of brand to brand. But you will find them in a lot of sort of fast food, hungry, youthful, quickly, exciting, bold, all these sort of like kind of things you'll find in sort of red, with the sort of, you know, clarity and sort of warmth of the yellow as well. And that's the sort of reddish colours. And then when you go to sort of the other side of the spectrum, when you're looking at like purple and blue, like purple is really warm and creative and wise and imaginative, while blue is very trustable. It shows strength, it shows defendable. It's interesting because, like, if you think of the psychology of colours and you think it's quite a set thing, it's not. I mean, when we're talking about blue there, and sort of the blue and red, really, quite opposite ends of the spectrum, we seem to put them a lot in sort of gender kind of types, right? So you think blue's boy, blue's male, and pink is female, the sort of reddish aspect of that. Blue's male, pink is female, and we think that that's something that's just the way it's been for ages. Pink is very feminine, it's very soft, while blue's very sort of calm and collected and peaceful, and something that you can trust and feel sort of strength from. Reminds you of kind of the sea, you know, calm, collected, cool, but can also show a huge rage if need be. So that gets assigned to the male sort of stereotype, and then the female sort of stereotype gets the pink. But that, I mean, not too long ago, that really wasn't the case. I mean, we're talking maybe about the 1800s. It was quite the opposite. The pink was the male colour, and blue was very much the female colour. And I think it was after the war, the first war, things kind of changed a little bit. Because in the first war, women would always wear blue and they would wear black because you think of them as, you want them to calm you down. They're the calmer and sort of the get on with life kind of thing. While men were more bold in their, because like I say, pink is really a form of red, and that's what it was looked at. It was more bold, and it was dashing, and it was charming, and any stereotypes just change. I mean, it's the same colour, but at one point you can say calm because men are calm, or should be. The stereotype of male should be calm and collected and just gets on with life and can be calm but can also rage. But it's also females because female are calm and collected. It's the way that we've somehow managed to put things. But yeah, so women would wear the sort of blue, blacky colours. Male would wear the sort of pinkish, reddy colour, and that was just looked at as wealthy and as very dashing and bold and charming. And after the war, and there's quite a few. When I was doing the research for this episode, it's honestly incredible to think how much our psychology and our day-to-day stereotypes have been influenced by the media. When you think it hasn't, I'm sure quite a few people out there know, for instance, that Santa Claus, who dresses in red and we all know as red, was not red, it was green. He used to be a green St. Nicholas. And through Coca-Cola taking Santa Claus and putting the red on him and just putting out, I mean, Coca-Cola's marketing is ridiculous. No matter where you go in the world, you will see a Coca-Cola either can, bottle, sign. You'll see their logo somewhere, at least, maybe. If you're out and about, you're talking about maybe 10 times in like half an hour, which is something. I mean, I'm not sure exactly of the number. It could be completely ridiculous, but you are talking about an absolutely ridiculous number. That's just their marketing strategy. It's just brand awareness, put our brand absolutely fucking everywhere, and if people see it everywhere, they'll just buy it. It's just because people will think that Coca-Cola's the shit, and it's worked. But they've also managed to kind of make us think that this huge national thing, which is Santa Claus, or international thing, Collie, which is Santa Claus, is red instead of green. They've completely changed the look, they've completely changed the colour, and that's just been accepted everywhere now. And that's the power of the media, and the power of marketing, and the power of businesses. And it's pretty much the exact same when you think about the whole gender thing. I mean, now people do gender reveals. If it's a girl, you'll get the pink. If it's a boy, you'll get the blue balloons or the smoke or whatever it is. But that was not the case. Like we just mentioned there, it was completely opposite. And a lot of things were actually marketed to men as pink and marketed to women as blue. But there was a lot of videos and sort of media that came out that was like, women, throw the blue, throw the black, it's time for pink, the future's pink, and it generally is. And there is sort of a theory out there that this was actually started by, oh God, what is his name? It's an ex-president of the United States, and after the war, excuse my absolute ignorance of that. I generally cannot remember what he's called, but his wife, I think her name was Maisie. I need to research this, and I'll come back to you guys on the next episode, and for sure. Or please research it because it was really interesting. But she came out after the war with these like really fancy, glittery pink dresses, and it was like, that changed the sort of ideology of what a lady should look like. If you look at really old sort of movies, you'd find them in their collared blue sort of long dresses, or short dresses with either trousers or skin tights underneath them. But that's completely changed. It changed to the very like posh, ladylike, pinkish, calm and very like sweet and soft sort of female stereotype and what a lady should be. But that was all through the psychology of colours, and it is just, it's cognition, you know. We see a colour and we associate it to something. And through that association, you start thinking that it means something when it really usually doesn't. But your cognitive sort of mind makes you believe that that is the case. And one of these colours, I mean, to me, the most fascinating of them all is the colour blue. The reason is that the colour blue, I mean, I've always had a fascination with the colour blue. And it's everywhere around us. I mean, it is generally everywhere around you. It is the sky. It is the sort of water, the seas. It's one of the most important colours for us, but it's actually one of the newest colours, or newest sort of worded colours. I think the ancient Greeks didn't even have a name for the colour blue. And even when they were used in, you know, like sort of middle-age sort of scribblings, they were horrible. And the colours that were used in them were very bland. The colour blue was very bland and very weak. And you could barely see it within any of the other colours because they couldn't put it into painting. And the history and story of how the colour blue actually kind of came about, and some of the stories that we're going to be telling you guys today is, I was doing my research on it, and it kind of blew my mind. You don't really expect it. I mean, we live in such a convenient sort of time where everything is just available. So to think that a colour is as out there as the colour blue was a very sort of rare and expensive and very unusual colour, was very interesting to me, and I'm sure it will be to you guys. But that's exactly it. If you've not guessed, that is the topic of today. We are going to be discussing the colour blue. As magical as that sounds, but honestly, it really is going to be interesting. So we start off our story with how blue kind of came to the Western cultures. Right. I mean, obviously, when you think beforehand, the main two colours were gold and white. Gold has always been shiny and lovely and expensive, and it kind of always gave off that idea of this is very valuable. And it was always, if you think the ancient Egyptians, they coated a lot of things with the colour gold. I mean, they used blue not quite a lot, but sometimes used blue as well. But to think about the sort of Western phase as well, it was really mainly gold and white with them. And when blue came over, it travelled quite a long way to go to the Western countries. There is a rock, and this rock is called lapis lazuli. Call it lapis. This rock kind of came from one place in the world. Now, obviously, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were people who were using things like sort of cobalt and azurite, but it would never give you the colour that lapis did. It only grew in one region, really, and that region is now what we know as, I think, Afghanistan. It's either Afghanistan or Kazakhstan. I'm pretty sure it's Afghanistan. And the rock itself is I mean, it's beautiful. If you can get yourself on Google or something, and I'm actually going to put a picture of the rock as our sort of the episode's picture. So even if you can just take a look at that, it's absolutely bloody gorgeous. It looks like a rock it just looks like a bit of the sky's fallen down. It's so deep, and it's so like dark and kind of rich in the blue colour, but you know, the mouldings and the stones around it and everything just looks so nice. But that stone only came from one part of the world, and you're talking about something like 3,000 miles for it to reach the sort of Western world and go to. You're talking about art, you're talking about Venice. So to reach somewhere like Italy, and that's where most of the colours, and that's where you can get most of the palettes were out at that time, around the 1900s. was in Venice in Italy. So 3,000 miles on a boat to travel from Afghanistan to the Western world, to Italy. Now you can imagine that's not the easiest of trips, and whoever makes that trip is going to want quite a bit of money for it. So, and to be honest with you, to even turn that stone into blue, into the colour blue, into paint, that took so long. It was, I mean, you can spend weeks, months to just get a small tub of paint. So it was an incredibly, incredibly expensive colour to get your hand on. And when it took that sort of rich, deep colour, because like I say, blue before that, and it was there, but it wasn't really any sort of decent blue. It was sort of just nasty water, very light, didn't have any sort of richness to it. It didn't stand out between all the sort of rich other colours that you could get from like yellow and red and things like that, because they were so rich, and red was just the colour back then. But when blue came along, and it came along in the way that it did from the rock lapis, in the consistency and the darkness and the beauty that it came in, it was incredible. And there is an artist that basically painted a lot of murals in in the main central church in Venice. And when he did, he painted the Virgin Mary in blue. He painted Christ in blue, and it became a very sort of religious colour. The way that he did it, he painted sort of the sky or the roof of the church in blue as well, and that to him was supposed to symbolise heaven. It was a completely lovely blue sky. The colour of the blue in it is just ridiculous. Lovely blue sky with golden stars in it, and that was and in the faces of the Virgin Mary and Jesus and some of the prophets, and that was supposed to be what he kind of thought heaven to be like. And when that happened, obviously, as happens in history, unfortunately, beautiful things in art gets taken to politics and money and capitalism, and these things are just human nature. But when they did kind of go ahead, the church basically said, we want to keep blue as ours. We want to make sure that blue's only used for the best. If Virgin Mary is going to get cloaked in blue, then we don't want every peasant wearing blue. We don't want blue to be the colour of the public. We want blue to be a very powerful, specific colour that is only worn by certain people. And to be fair, it was mainly even only used in sort of church paintings. And again, at that point, it was that most church paintings were used, or sort of blue was used to kind of cloak the Virgin Mary, which is a huge symbol in the Christian community, and was at that time as well. So we saw blue basically becoming a crime. They used, if you were a peasant and you were wearing blue, that was a crime. You couldn't use it in your paintings willy-nilly. You know, you could use it just a tiny little bit, and you would have to kind of show it to the sort of the church, and the church would have to agree that that's an acceptable use of the colour blue, and it can't be as deep or as colourful or as beautiful as what is cloaked or what is in our churches. But from mental things like that come people who always are going to want to break that, and are always going to want to, break the limit, break the rules, and show beauty in a completely different way, and do things in a completely different way. You have to understand as well that going against the church at that time, I mean, you're talking about the 1400s, going against the church at that time is like declaring war against the government. You know, church was pretty much everything, and it was under sort of Christian constitution that most Western countries were living, and it was, or some sort of religious sort of governing body. But in Venice, it definitely was the church. So around 14 I think it was. An artist called Tishrin was born. Now, I don't know how to spell his name. I find it very difficult to spell his name. But he basically, he was a colour fanatic. He was an absolute colour fanatic, and he loved the colour blue. And the first sort of drawing that he did for sort of the church, he drew the Virgin Mary in her cloak in blue, but she wasn't a centre character anymore. She wasn't straight in the centre and all blue and all showing, but right next to her was St. Peter, and he was dressed in an all blue cloak, and that was one of the first sort of breaking my mind that someone else would be getting this colour blue. And then there was a painting that he drew, and the painting kind of, he drew that, and it wasn't shown for many, many years, and it wasn't sort of looked at for many, many years. But when it was looked at, it was quite filthy and needed restoration, and it was restored by an American not too long ago. I think it was maybe in the sort of 1900s. Couldn't tell you exactly the time, but around that time the painting was restored, and when it was looked at, the blue in it was magnificent, and he had used so much blue in that it was mind-blowing to people around him, because it must have cost him so much. Like I say, the colour blue was so difficult to get your hand on. It was actually more expensive than gold. So to think that colour blue that's around us, literally, I'm just looking around the room that I'm in right now and I can see the colour blue everywhere. But to get that colour blue back then, in the 1400s, you would have paid so much. So but he wanted to put his art into it. He wanted to put the colour blue into his art. He wanted to do something completely different. And like I say, back then that was magnificent to do, because you could barely ever see it. And it does give such a calming and soothing and lovely emotion. So when we do think about his painting, and that painting especially, it was, I think it was something out of sort of Roman mythology, and it was some sort of just raiders, just wild sort of people, who were about having some sort of row. And one of them, who was cloaked in blue, had her breast out. And you can imagine, this was a colour that was reserved for the Virgin Mary. So as much as you may think a breast out, it really isn't anything, but back then it was a huge thing. When you find something like that, and when something like that was seen for the first time, that broke that sort of... We found out after the restoration that back then, when that picture was out, and when that picture was first seen by the public, it must have blown minds. You have got something that was specifically reserved for the Virgin Mary, and then, you kind of broke minds after by giving it to St. Peter, and not putting the Virgin Mary as the central sort of character, the central sort of person in that painting. But then giving it to some sort of wild person that isn't. When we say wild, I don't know why I'm thinking of Game of Thrones and just thinking wildling. But that's pretty much what it was looked at. It was someone who was just a raider. They didn't have they didn't dress very well. They didn't care about anything. And like I say, she had a breast out, and to them, to that time, it must have been completely and utterly mind-boggling. And that was the first time that the colour blue was liberated from the religious shackles. And that was completely revolutionary. If you think about many artists and many things that kind of came after that, it's absolutely ridiculous that blue was reserved and shackled at one point to religion. and you can only ever use it for religion. So that was totally revolutionary. And if you go forward, there's another two kind of really cool stories. So in sort of the Romance era, which was around the sort of 1600s, when everything was romantic and men were charming and big and women were very sort of ladylike, but it was all about being your charming self, all about being a Don Juan. And at that time, the colour blue was used to emphasise the calmness. There was I can't remember what the movie's called or what the author's called, but I do remember this German sort of kind of play, like movie theatre, short movie kind of thing. And it was this kid that couldn't go to sleep because he was getting these dreams at night, and they were incredibly vivid. And whenever he would go to sleep, he would get these really ridiculous dreams and sort of sights and viewings, and they would be like so vivid in his mind, and it was all he would think about. But it formed to always being the same one, to the point that it consumed him, and it was a blue flower. It's all that could bring him calmness. It's all he could think about. And that had a huge impact on the psychology of people as well, because that blue flower was looked at as this romantic, calm, beautiful, but dangerous sort of colour. And that's the power of blue. Blue isn't just a calm colour. Blue isn't a powerful and dangerous colour. Blue's a mixture of both. Blue's the unknown. Blue the sky that we can't see past, and blue's the sea that we can't see past the horizon of. And I think that's the fascination that we've always had with blue, and that's why artists have always had a huge fascination with the colour blue, because it's unknown for them. It sparks their creativity in ways that nothing else that has any sort of rules or regulations or societal pressures or societal cognitive viewings can change or can take in, or can portray in any other way. So the colour really is magnificent. Picasso used it a lot. Now, there's a really sort of interesting story about Picasso, because Picasso's best friend basically killed himself in a bar. So he took his girlfriend to a bar. They were sitting there smooching it up like nothing else. Picasso, when he was younger, he literally was whatever the world had to offer him, he would take, whether that was drugs, whether it was prostitutes. He was really up for good times, him and his best friend. And I think Picasso was more moved by his art, but his best friend kind of went a bit insane towards the end. Because like I say, he took his girlfriend to a bar. They were having a bit of an exclusive time. Again, at that point back in the day, it probably wasn't something that was normal, how sort of open about it they were. People didn't know where to look, but it all ended with even more insanity, in which he literally took out his gun, pointed at his girlfriend, shot at her. He missed. Didn't think he did, though. He thought he killed her, so he turned he turned the gun to his head and put a bullet through his own head. And Picasso has a few paintings that are, you can see he's reliving that in his head. From my research, he moved into his best friend's apartment. He got with his best friend's girlfriend after that. I think he was just trying to kind of embody his girlfriend and live his life. He didn't want to let go that was gone. And during that time when he painted, everything that he painted was in a ridiculously whitey blue. That colour of death that you think of, that whitey sort of blue colour, and that's how he always painted his friend. There's a painting where he's got a skeleton figure playing a guitar, and it's also in that blue. And most of his paintings, he has what we call what's called the blue era, and some of that is so mesmerising. It's sort of what different shadings of the same colour, but the amount of feelings and emotions and reality that you get from it is ridiculous. And someone who was mesmerised by it as well is someone that we've mentioned in previous episodes, and that's Carl Jung. And if you don't remember who Carl Jung is, but he was a big factor in a lot of the sort of social psychology that we talked about. He used to be friends with Freud, but he sort of went down the sort of humanistic way, and he believes, he's one of the people that highly believes significantly in energies, and that we pass energy to each other, and that energy is all about us, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, it is all about us. And if we all felt or sent positive energy, good things will happen. Basically collectivism and social psychology, collectivism and energy psychology. I've mentioned him in plenty of other episodes, so please do go back and sort of have a wee listen to them to hear more about his work, or just go on Google, because Carl Jung is incredibly fascinating, and the things that he did was so cool. So I would really recommend to read more about him. But he was fascinated by Picasso and his work as well, and he thought that he could see schizophrenia through Picasso's work, just through his difference in blue colours, from the really navy blue to the sort of lighter, and it was like he was two different people. He was this depressed, manic, couldn't get over it person, to this like trying to find the light kind of thing. I took a look at them, and what I got more out of it when I was doing my research, what I got more out of it is that was that colour at that point, and the shadings that he used described and imitated his depressive and sort of closed thoughts, because not every depressed person sees black. Some depressed people just see more dead colours, and to them that's just more depressive and more sad, because it's beautiful things that have been broken. I mean, the darkness is always the darkness, and you can get over that. It's when beautiful things, it's when expectations are broken, that's when it really, really gets to us. And I think that the colour blue that was used by Picasso at that point, and the shadings of it, really, really showed his depression, his unwillingness to get out of that sort of dead bluey colour to the nicer things. Because like I say, blue is all around us, and it can be gorgeous, but it can also be very dead. It can also be very, when you think of like that sort of whitey blue colour you go when you die, or that, sort of cartoons and stuff like that is kind of portrayed out when someone dies. You get that sort of whitey blue colour, and it's very zombie-ish. So I think that was that kind of portraying through his work, especially that one of his last paintings in that era was one where he drew this woman, and you know what? I think I'm actually going to use this painting as my episode sort of wallpaper, because it's so mesmerizing, and there's so much to it, and it's this shading of blue, this dead look, but with a smile. It's like someone's drowning but smiling nonetheless. And throughout all that blue, there's that really fascinating, mesmerizing sort of pinkish tone to her lips that just changes everything. It just changes everything in the painting, and that's just the most amazing thing about Picasso, the way he was able to kind of portray so much through strange and very basic pictures and paintings sometimes. So take a look at that. It will be our sort of episode wallpaper, and it's just lovely. It's just absolutely and utterly amazing. But the colour blue is just so bloody strong and so bloody relatable. It's so easy to relate to the colour blue. It's so easy to feel that it is around you. And like I say, I think for me, the thing that's always fascinated me, for a lot of people really, the thing that will always fascinate about blue is the infinity. And an artist that was known to have really, really felt and seen that sort of infiniteness to the colour blue is an artist called Yves Klein. He's not that old. I mean, he's still not alive. He did pass away quite young from heart attacks. But he was a very, out of the ordinary artist, but he absolutely loved the colour blue. And it was said that when he was young, he used to just sit and kind of stare out into the sky, and it just fascinated him so much. Because he was born in Nice, and there was so much sort of capitalism around Nice at the time that he was about, and it was his way of escaping art and just kind of sitting down and looking at the sky and being creative was his way of sort of escaping that bustle and you have to make money and you have to have a certain social standard to be accepted. It just really was not his thing. He actually came up with his own colour, the colour, one of the shades of blue, and it was called Yves Blue, and it's basically the colour that is used more than anything now to kind of draw the sea or the sky. It's a much lighter tone of blue than the navy blue or the marine blue that we're more used to, which is the darker sort of, if you think of like the 1400s when blue was used in a lot of the sort of Christian things, and we were talking about before in the church paintings, it was a very dark, deep marine blue. But Yves blue was very sea-ish. If you think of a bright blue sky, that's basically what his blue was like. And he has, I think he has a painting that is just the colour blue. And he spent days working on that, picking the right canvas and ensuring that the strokes were perfect so nothing was out of the way. It's incredible to think someone will spend days and it literally is just a blue canvas. But to certain people, the way that you want to sort of do these things everything, these things have to be perfected. And to him, he was sharing that colour that was all he could see with the world. All he wanted to do was put that colour everywhere. I'm pretty sure the premiere of that colour, when he actually managed to get that colour, I think he blew 2,000 balloons and let them out in the skies of Paris. Like, it was a huge, huge thing to him. And I remember during my research, while I was kind of looking through the stuff that he's done, there was a photo that he took. So he went to a really sort of small town in France, found a sort of first floor apartment, went into that, and he has a picture of him basically jumping out of the balcony of the first floor building, looking up in the sky with the arms afloat, because that was his sort of art. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to fly away. He wanted to break from the ordinary. He wanted that infiniteness of the sky, and you can just see it in sort of his eyes when he's looking at the sky, when he's jumping. Search for it. He's called Yves Klein, and I think it was in the 60s that he was about, and that photo came out. But it's just really, really interesting to see to learn how mesmerised he was by the colour, how mesmerised he was by the infiniteness of the sky and the sea. And it's just really mesmerising to kind of learn about colours in that way. You would never think that the colour blue had this. I mean, I'm sure there's so much history to what I've just mentioned. This is 2 days worth of research, and I could have done more and more and more and more. I wish I could talk about more and more and more, but I couldn't really find anything else to fit in sort of our hourly episode, and I could have probably done it in 2-3 hours just talking about all the different things and going into detail about so many of the stories that I'd learned. But next time that you see a colour, be mindful of the colour and the effect that it is having on you. When you see a business's brand, sometimes it is, I think, nice to just sit and look and kind of understand why we're reacting to that brand in a certain way. Because sometimes you want to challenge that. Not a brand, sorry, but just any colour, anything that's cognitive, like colours or anything that you see and all of a sudden get this like automatic thought. Especially if it's a negative one. Because negative thoughts are not going to cause any sort of positiveness. So being aware of your negative thoughts, if they're automatic and if they're cognitive, whether they're colours, whether they're reactions, whether they're things, whether they're certain types of people, challenge them. Just be, you know what? Don't challenge them. Just be mindful of them. Just be aware that you have these thoughts. And I think it's just awesome to learn that these things, like we have these thoughts with something as simple as the colour blue. So yeah, that's the end of our story time today. But before I go, I'm gonna leave you guys with a little bit of guided meditation. As mentioned, please give us your feedback at the end of the episode. Do like, share, love, support. It means the world to us, honestly. When you guys share the podcast, when you guys rate the podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, all these things, it really helps in us getting a better platform for the podcast as well. So please do show the love, and till next time, be mindful, take care of yourself, take care of everyone else, and just be aware. Be in peace. So if you close your eyes and start taking deep breaths into your nose and out through your mouth, feeling the cold air or the hot air going through your nose, through your lungs, into your stomach, and then back out again. Try and listen for any sounds around you. The feelings that you have of your body touching the seat that you're sitting on, or if you're standing, the sole of your feet on the ground, your bottom on your seat, your back on the back of your seat, your elbows on an elbow rest. All these thoughts and emotions, all these feelings, all these senses, be aware of them. All whilst continuing to maintain your breathing. One, through your nose. 2, out your mouth. 3, in your nose. And 4, out your mouth. Just be aware of where you are. And when you're ready, open your eyes again, whilst continuing to breathe. And just think about how you feel. Do you feel any better? Do you feel more relaxed? As always, we recommend to use more professional meditation techniques and platforms. We always recommend that you use Headspace. I love Headspace, and I think it's basic especially for beginners. If you are a beginner, do give them a shout. It's an absolutely beautiful app. We're not sponsored by them, but we just love the work that they do. Till next week, guys. Take care.